for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your host today. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is no longer House Speaker. Trump has been gagged. The workers at Kaiser Permanente are on strike. And Ottawa County Board of Commissioners are once again accused of violating Michigan's Open Meetings Act. So we'll talk about all these stories plus a lot more on today's show. Before we get started with today's topics, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on X, the former Twitter, Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, X, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. I almost said Twitter again. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, and KZGM in Kabul, Missouri. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica affiliate. So let's get to our top story for this week. We are recording this show on Wednesday, October 4th, 2023. This is Lisa Mascaro and Farnoosh Amiri writing for the Associated Press out of Washington. This is dated October 3rd. Speaker Kevin McCarthy was voted out of the job Tuesday in an extraordinary showdown, a first in U.S. history, forced by a contingent of hard-right conservatives and throwing the House and its Republican leadership into chaos. It's the end of the political line for McCarthy, who has said repeatedly that he never gives up, but found himself with almost no options remaining. Neither the right flank Republicans who engineered his ouster nor the Democrats who piled on seemed open to negotiating. McCarthy told lawmakers in the evening he would not run again for Speaker, putting the gavel up for grabs. Next steps are highly uncertain with no obvious successor to lead the House Republican majority. Action is halted in the House until next week when Republicans try to elect a new Speaker. Alternating between upbeat assessment of his speakership and angry score settling of those who ousted him, at a press conference at the Capitol, McCarthy said, quote, "I may have lost this vote today, but as I walk out of this chamber, I feel fortunate to have served. I wouldn't change a thing." End of quote. McCarthy's chief rival, Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, orchestrated the rare vote on the obscure motion to vacate and pushed ahead swiftly into a dramatic afternoon roll call. While McCarthy enjoyed support from most Republicans in his slim majority, 8 Republican detractors, many of the same hard-right holdouts who tried to stop him from becoming Speaker in January, essentially forced him out. Stillness fell as the presiding officer gavelled the vote closed 216 to 210, saying the office of the Speaker, quote, "is hereby declared vacant." End of quote. Moments later, a top McCarthy ally, Representative Patrick McHenry, Republican of North Carolina, took the gavel and, according to House rules, was named Speaker pro tempore to serve in the office until a new Speaker is chosen. The House then briskly recessed as lawmakers met privately to discuss the path forward. And by the way, as hard as McHenry hit that gavel, I'm surprised it didn't bust in two. He was obviously not very happy. It was a stunning moment for McCarthy, a punishment fueled by growing grievances, but sparked by his weekend decision to work with Democrats to keep the federal government open rather than risk a shutdown. But in many ways, McCarthy's ouster was set in motion when, in deal-making with hard-right holdouts at the start of the year, he agreed to a series of demands, including a rules change that allowed any single lawmaker to file the motion to vacate. As the House fell silent, Gates, a top ally of Donald Trump, rose to offer his motion. Leaders tried to turn it back, but the vote was 218 to 208, with 11 Republicans against tabling the motion, a sign of trouble to come. The House then opened a floor debate unseen in modern times, and Republicans argued publicly amongst themselves for more than an hour. Oh, this is great. So here they are throwing Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment right out the window. As debate got underway, urging his colleagues not to plunge the House Republican majority into chaos, Republican Representative Tom Cole of Oklahoma said, quote, "It's a sad day," end of quote. But Gates shot back during the debate, quote, "Chaos is Speaker McCarthy," end of quote. As the fiery debate dragged on, many of the complaints against the Speaker revolved around his truthfulness and his ability to keep the promises he has made. Almost alone, Gates led his side of the floor debate, criticizing the debt deal McCarthy made with President Joe Biden and the vote to prevent a government shutdown, which conservatives opposed as they demanded steeper spending cuts. But a long line of McCarthy supporters stood up for him, including Representative Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, a leader of the Conservative Freedom Caucus, who said, quote, "He has kept his word," end of quote. Representative Garrett Graves, Republican of Louisiana, waved a cell phone, saying it was disgusting that hard-right colleagues were fundraising off the move in text messages seeking donations. McCarthy of California insisted he would not cut a deal with Democrats to remain in power, not that he could have relied on their help even if he had asked. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries sent in a letter to colleagues that he wants to work with Republicans, but he was unwilling to provide the votes he needed to save McCarthy. Announcing the Democratic leadership would vote for the motion to oust the Speaker, Jeffries said, quote, "It is now the responsibility of the GOP members to end the House Republican Civil War," end of quote. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Biden, quote, "hopes the House will quickly elect a speaker," end of quote. Once that happened, she added that, quote, "he looks forward to working together with them," end of quote. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell issued a statement thanking McCarthy, quote, "for what is often a thankless role," end of quote. At the Capitol, both Republicans and Democrats met privately ahead of the historic afternoon vote. Behind closed doors, McCarthy told fellow Republicans, "Let's get on with it." McCarthy invoked Republican Speaker Joseph Cannon, who more than 100 years ago confronted his critics head-on by calling their bluff and setting the vote himself on his ouster. Cannon survived that takedown attempt, which was the first time the House had actually voted to consider removing its Speaker. A more recent threat against John Boehner in 2015 didn't make it to a vote, but led him to early retirement. Gates was in attendance, but he did not address the room. Across the way in the Capitol, Democrats lined up for a long discussion and unified around one common point. McCarthy cannot be trusted, several lawmakers in the room said. Representative Richard Neal, Democrat of Massachusetts, said, quote, "I think it's safe to say there's not a lot of goodwill in that room for Kevin McCarthy," end of quote. Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, said, quote, "At the end of the day, the country needs a speaker that can be relied upon. We don't trust him. Their members don't trust him. And you need a certain degree of trust to be the speaker," end of quote. Removing the speaker launches the House Republicans into chaos heading into a busy fall when Congress will need to fund the government again or risk a mid-November shutdown. Typically, top leaders would be next in line for the job, but Majority Leader Steve Scalise is battling cancer, and Majority Whip Tom Emmer, like any potential candidate, may have trouble securing the vote. Another leading Republican, Representative Elise Stefanik of New York, is also a Trump ally. One of McHenry's first acts in the temporary position was to oust Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi from her honorary office at the Capitol while she was away in California to pay tribute to Senator Dianne Feinstein. Scalise said, quote, "No matter who is going to be the speaker, the challenges still remain, but I think the opportunity is there to continue moving forward," end of quote. Asked if he was physically up to the job, Scalise said, quote, "I feel great," end of quote. It took McCarthy himself 15 rounds in January over multiple days of voting before he secured the support from his colleagues to gain the gavel. Trump, who is the Republican frontrunner in the 2024 race to challenge Biden, complained about the chaos. On social media, he asked, quote, "Why is it that Republicans are always fighting among themselves?" End of quote. Well, they're fighting over you, you orange bastard. Some of them would love to get rid of you. Some of them would just love to suck different body parts of yours. Asked about McCarthy's ouster as he exited court in New York, where he is on trial for business fraud, Trump did not respond. One key McCarthy ally, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, who is also close with Trump, took to social media urging support for our speaker. Republicans left the chamber in a daze, totally uncertain about next steps. Representative Debbie Lesko, Republican of Arizona, said, quote, "I honestly don't know. This is a total disaster." End of quote. Many had lined up to hug McCarthy, some to shake his hand. Democrats who have bristled at McCarthy's leadership, cajoling them 1 minute, walking away from deals the next, said they were just holding back, waiting for Republicans to figure out how to run the House. Representative Don Bacon, Republican of Nebraska, the leader of a centrist group, said the only option was to leave the 8 hardliners behind and try to work across the aisle. He said, quote, "We're going to stay with Kevin. He told us earlier he'll never quit." End of quote. But McCarthy made it clear Tuesday night that he would not try to win back the job. So now that he's out, what's next? We have this story. This is also Farnoosh Amiri writing for the Associated Press. This is dated October 4th out of Washington. The House of Representatives is entering uncharted territory after a far-right effort to remove fellow Republican Kevin McCarthy from the speakership succeeded thanks to support from Democrats, and we already mentioned that. Republican Representative Patrick McHenry, now the acting speaker, declared the House in recess until both parties can decide on a path forward. There is no obvious successor to lead the House Republican majority now that McCarthy has opted not to run for the job again. So here's a closer look at what could happen next. First off, who's in charge of the House now? Immediately after the vote, McHenry, a close McCarthy ally, was named temporary speaker or speaker pro tempore. The North Carolina Republican was picked from a list that the speaker is required to keep of members who can serve in this position in the event a chair is vacated. McCarthy turned over that private list to the House clerk in January when he was first elected speaker. And while McHenry can serve in the temporary role indefinitely, he does not have the full power of a duly elected speaker, but only those that are deemed necessary and appropriate for the purpose of electing someone to the job, according to the rules governing the House. McHenry will be unable to bring legislation to the floor or take it off. He also does not have the power to issue subpoenas or sign off on any other official House business that would require the approval of the Speaker. So what happens next? McHenry's first order of business is to elect a new Speaker. As of now, it is unclear who House Republicans will nominate for the speakership. Some members left the chamber Tuesday determined to renominate McCarthy and vote for him for Speaker until it passes. But now that he is out of the running, the path is clear for any Republican to jump in. Some members, including Gates, have been broaching potential consensus candidates like Majority Leader Steve Scalise or Whip Tom Emmer, who they see as bringing the conference together. Other names up for discussion include Representative Kevin Hern, chair of the Republican Study Committee, and Representative Jim Jordan, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee and a favorite of the right flank of the party. God forbid he gets in. Once Republicans decide who to nominate for Speaker, the House would have to vote as many times as it takes for a candidate to receive the majority of those present and voting for Speaker. It can quickly become an arduous exercise, as it did in January when it took McCarthy an unprecedented 15 rounds to win the gavel. Another Speaker? Once the Speaker candidate has won a majority of the vote, the clerk will announce the results of the election. During a normal Speaker election, which takes place at the start of each Congress, a bipartisan committee, usually consisting of members from the home state of the chosen candidate, will then escort the Speaker-elect to the chair on the dais where the oath of office is administered. The oath is identical to the one new members will take once a speaker is chosen. It is unclear if that is the same process that will be followed in this instance. It is customary for the minority leader to join the successor at the speaker's chair, where they will pass the gavel as a nod to the potential future working relationship between one party leader and another. Well, I don't know if that's going to be the case this time around. I just think it's great that Republicans are just sniping and backbiting each other right now. Even the ones on the hard right are sniping and backbiting each other. You have Green, MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying, oh no, we need to keep McCarthy as the speaker. You got Gates saying, no, he's got to go. You know, I've seen the joke on social media that Matt Gates took out somebody that was older than 18 for the first time. So there you go. Yes, Matt Gates is a pedophile. So there you go. Allegedly. All right, let's get to our next story here. This is another great story. Donald Trump in deep, deep trouble with this judge in New York who is absolutely not playing around with him. This is Michael R. Sizak, Jennifer Peltz, and Bobby Kaina Calvin writing for the Associated Press. This is dated October 3rd out of New York City. Rebuking Donald Trump, a state court judge imposed a limited gag order Tuesday on Trump's civil business fraud trial and ordered him to delete a social media post that publicly maligned a key court staffer. Judge Arthur Engeron told all participants in the case not to smear court personnel, warning of serious sanctions if they do. After complaining without names about a defendant's, quote, disparaging, untrue, and personally identifying post about a member of my staff, end of quote, Judge Engeron said, quote, personal attacks on members of my court staff are unacceptable, not appropriate, and I will not tolerate them, end of quote. A few hours earlier, Trump had posted a photo of Engeron's principal law clerk, Allison Greenfield, posing with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, at a public event. Trump has repeatedly cast the trial as a political attack by New York's Democratic Attorney General Letitia James. Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform that it was disgraceful that Greenfield was working with the judge in the courtroom, adding to complaints he'd made outside court Monday. The post apparently sparked a series of closed-door courtroom discussions involving Trump and lawyers for both sides during what's usually a lunch break. By the time the gag order was issued, Trump had deleted the post as Engeron ordered, according to the judge. As for Schumer, a spokesperson called the post pathetic and said the senator doesn't know Greenfield and is in photos with thousands of constituents. Aside from that sideshow, James's attorney questioned an accountant Tuesday in an effort to build the state's case that Trump and others at his company had full control over the preparation of misleading and false financial statements at the heart of their case. The state's lawsuit alleges that Trump and his business chronically lied about his wealth on financial statements given to banks, insurers, and others. Also on Tuesday, Engeron set the record straight about a comment that Trump had touted as an important victory. The judge had suggested on Monday the testimony about Trump's 2011 financial statement might be beyond a 2014 time limit for claims in this case. Trump's legal team had argued that the time limit cuts off most of the claims, but Engeron ruled last week that all the claims were allowable under the statute of limitations, and he made clear Tuesday that the trial isn't, quote, an opportunity to relitigate what I have already decided, end of quote. He said that at the trial's early stage, he is inclined to give both sides considerable leeway to connect older evidence to claims in the lawsuit. Trump denies any wrongdoing and again branded the case a scam on Tuesday. Now, if he wants to see a scam, he needs to look in the mirror. He and his lawyers have said his financial statements were legitimate representations of the worth of unique luxury properties made even more valuable because of their association with him. The defense also emphasizes that the financial statements bore disclaimers saying that they weren't audited and that others, quote, might reach different conclusions, end of quote, about his financial position if they had more information. I love it. Oh, these properties are worth a lot more because they're tied to my name. Nobody, they're worth less because your name is on them. Accountant Don Bender continued testifying Tuesday about his years preparing those statements from figures that Trump's company supplied. He said in some years the Trump organization failed to provide all documents necessary for producing the statements, despite attesting in letters to the accounting firm that it had provided all financial records and hadn't, quote, knowingly withheld, end of quote, relevant data. Bender testified, quote, they were not giving all of the documents that we needed, end of quote. He further explained that, quote, there were certain appraisals out there for a number of years that we had never seen, end of quote. During cross-examination, Bender acknowledged he missed a change in information about the size of Trump's penthouse at Trump Tower. Defense lawyer Jesus M. Suarez seized on that, telling Bender that Trump was sitting through the trial and his company and employees were, quote, going through hell, end of quote, because, quote, you missed it, end of quote. Bender said he couldn't be faulted. He said, quote, we didn't screw it up. The Trump organization made a mistake and we didn't catch it, end of quote. After the session ended with another closed-door discussion among Trump, James, and their lawyers, Trump emerged saying that he'd be back for a third day Wednesday. Trump plans to testify later in the trial, but he doesn't have to attend it now. While grumbling that he'd rather be on the campaign trail, he has used the waiting cameras in the courthouse hallway as a microphone for political messaging. Which, if I was the judge, I'd cut that shit out real fast, too. I'd slap a huge gag order on that orange mouth. James scored an early victory when Engeron, a Democrat, ruled last week that Trump committed fraud by exaggerating the size of his Trump Tower apartment, claiming his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida was worth as much as $739 million, and putting similar oversized valuations on office towers, golf courses, and other assets. The non-jury trial concerns 6 remaining claims in the lawsuit and how much Trump might owe in penalties. James is seeking $250 million and a ban on Trump doing business in New York. The judge has already ruled that some of Trump's companies should be dissolved as punishment. So that's the good news there. I love that. It's considered the death penalty for businesses. Speaking of businesses that need to go bye-bye permanently forever, one of those is the health insurance industry, because the government should be running that. It's called single-payer universal health care. It's what every other country in the world has except for us, and that's something we really need to have. So let's get to our next story here. This is Stephanie Dazio writing for the Associated Press. This is dated October 4th out of Los Angeles. Picketing began Wednesday morning at Kaiser Permanente hospitals as some 75,000 healthcare workers go on strike in Virginia, California, and 3 other states over wages and staffing shortages, marking the latest major labor unrest in the United States. Kaiser Permanente is one of the country's larger insurers and healthcare system operators with 39 hospitals nationwide. Now, wait a minute. I'm going to stop right here. Why is the largest insurance company owning hospitals? Why? That should be seen as a conflict of interest. The nonprofit company based in Oakland, California, provides health coverage for nearly 13 million people, sending customers to clinics and hospitals it runs or contracts with to provide care. Now, just because they're quote-unquote a nonprofit company doesn't mean they're not making a profit. They're making profit hand over fist. The coalition of Kaiser Permanente unions, representing about 85,000 of the health system's employees nationally, approved a strike for 3 days in California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, and for 1 day in Virginia and Washington, D.C. The strikers include licensed vocational nurses, home health aides, and ultrasound sonographers, as well as technicians in radiology, x-ray, surgical, pharmacy, and emergency departments. Doctors are not participating, and Kaiser says its hospitals, including emergency rooms, will remain open during picketing. The company said it was bringing in thousands of temporary workers to fill gaps during the strike, but the strike could lead to delays in getting appointments and non-urgent procedures being rescheduled. Smart workers in the healthcare industry will know not to cross picket lines. Once a scab, always a scab. It comes amid unprecedented worker organizing, from strike authorizations to work stoppages within multiple industries this year, including transportation, entertainment, and hospitality. Wednesday's strike is the latest one for the healthcare industry this year as it continues to confront burnout with the heavy workloads, problems that were exacerbated greatly by the pandemic. Unions representing Kaiser workers in August asked for a $25 hourly minimum wage, as well as increases of 7% each year in the first 2 years and 6.25% each year in the 2 years afterward. They say understaffing is boosting the hospital system's profits but hurting patients, and executives have been bargaining in bad faith during negotiations. Mickey Fletchell, a licensed vocational nurse based in a Kaiser medical office in Camarillo, California, said, quote, "They're not listening to the frontline healthcare workers. We're striking because of our patients. We don't want to have to do it, but we will do it." End of quote. Kaiser has proposed minimum hourly wages of between $21 to $23 next year, depending on the location. Since 2022, the hospital system has hired 51,000 workers and has plans to add 10,000 more people by the end of the month. Now listen to this, folks. Here's why they're striking. Kaiser Permanente reported $2.1 billion in net income for this year's second quarter on more than $25 billion in operating revenue. But the company said it was dealing with cost headwinds and challenges from inflation and labor shortages. Oh, cry me a river. Kaiser executive Michelle Gaskell-Hames defended the company and said its practices, compensation, and retention are better than its competitors, even as the entire sector faces the same challenges. Gaskell-Hames, the president of the Kaiser Foundation Health Plan and Hospitals of Southern California and Hawaii, said, quote, "Our focus for the dollars that we bring in are to keep them invested in value-based care." End of quote. She added that Kaiser only faces 7% turnover compared to the industry standard of 21%, despite the effects of the pandemic. She added, quote, "I think coming out of the pandemic, healthcare workers have been completely burned out. The trauma that was felt caring for so many COVID patients and patients that died was just difficult." End of quote. Yeah, I think we can all agree on that there, lady. The workers' last contract was negotiated in 2019 before the pandemic. Hospitals generally have struggled in recent years with high labor costs, staffing shortages, and rising levels of uncompensated care. That is according to Rick Gundling, a senior vice president with the Healthcare Financial Management Association, a nonprofit that works with healthcare finance executives. Most of their revenue is fixed, coming from government-funded programs like Medicare and Medicaid, according to Gundling. He added that means that revenue growth is, quote, "only possible by increasing volumes, which is difficult even under the best of circumstances." End of quote. Workers calling for higher wages, better working conditions, and job security, especially since the end of the pandemic, have been increasingly willing to walk out on the job as employers face a greater need for workers. The California legislature has sent Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom a bill that would increase the minimum wage for the state's 455,000 healthcare workers to $25 per hour over the next decade. The governor has until October 14th to decide whether to sign or veto it. Now, what they should do is bring up their wages to $25 per hour overnight. Sorry. They need to work too. They need to eat too. They need to feed their families, put food on the table, clothe their children, keep a roof over their head, just like everybody else. And speaking of strikes, let's get to our update on the United Auto Workers strike. This is Paula Gardner writing for Bridge, Michigan. This is dated October 3rd. As the National United Auto Workers strike continues to ramp up, with 2 more assembly plants added to the total on Friday, the strike is taking a toll on the economy. A report released Monday from Anderson Economic Group of East Lansing estimates that the first 2 weeks of the strike has cost the U.S. economy $3.95 billion. As of Friday, before 7,000 additional workers joined the picket lines, Anderson estimated that the U.S. economy had lost $325 million in direct wages, $1.12 billion in earnings for General Motors, Ford Motor Company, and Stellantis, $1.29 billion in supplier wages and earnings, and $1.2 billion in revenue for auto dealers. These numbers have likely climbed since Friday when the UAW added additional strike targets. There are now about 25,000 workers on strike at 43 plants, warehouse, and automotive facilities. Patrick Anderson, AEG's principal and CEO, said, quote, "Suppliers were particularly hard hit by the UAW strategy of announcing specific plants to be struck just hours before they were shut down," end of quote. He noted that when walkouts shut down 38 U.S. distribution centers on September 22nd, the strike's impact spread to dealers, customers, and additional suppliers. Michigan retailers are starting to wonder if the strike is reaching them after watching sales plummet in August as union leaders told workers to start saving. Andrea Bitely, spokesperson for the Michigan Retailers Association, told Bridge on Tuesday, quote, "Our folks are nervous about what the strike holds," end of quote. In August, 56% of the retailers surveyed by the MRA experienced sales declines over the previous month, and optimism also declined since July. In August, just over half of Michigan's retailers said they expect flat or declining sales in November as the holiday season takes off. Since the strike started on September 15th, many of the state's retailers are saying they see customers willing to spend money on necessities, but not on discretionary items. This could be related to student loan payments, which had been frozen in recent years due to the pandemic now coming due. Bitely said that retailers are concerned that the strike will further suppress spending, adding, quote, "There's definitely uncertainty going into the holidays because the longer the strike lasts, the less disposable income folks will have to make those holiday purchases, and the holidays are the lifeblood for retail," end of quote. Well, that they are. Well, then that should be more impetus for GM, Ford, and Stellantis, the former Chrysler, to bargain in good faith with their workers and get things moving. Give the union what they want. They've busted their ass. They've broken their backs. They've literally have died in the factory floor for your profits. Pay them now. All right, it's time for our next segment.
Stop. Count time.
You know what that means. It's hammer time. It is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. And we have a repeat winner this week. It is Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback for the New York Jets, who right now is out with a Achilles tendon injury. He's going to be out all year. That's what happens when old men think they can play young kids' games. I'm just going to say that right out loud there. Oh, Jesus. This is Jordan Mendoza writing for USA Today. This is dated October 3rd. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers has really put his foot in his mouth this time. Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce has become the center of attention in the NFL thanks to Taylor Swift. But Aaron Rodgers appears to know him for a different reason, as the four-time MVP referred to Kelce as Mr. Pfizer. Yeah, that means that Aaron Rodgers is Mr. Anti-Vaxxer, Mr. Anti-Science, Mr. Moron, Idiot, Imbecile, whatever. The New York Jets quarterback, who was in attendance for the Chiefs-Jets matchup on Sunday as he rehabs from a torn Achilles, was seen chatting with Patrick Mahomes and Kelce on the field prior to Kansas City's win. On his weekly appearance on the Pat McAfee Show, Rodgers was asked about his team's performance in the 3-point loss, and that's when he appeared to take a subtle jab at Kelce. Rodgers said, quote, "There's some sentiment that there's some sort of moral victory out there, that we hung with the champs. Our defense played well and Pat didn't have a crazy game. And Mr. Pfizer, we kind of shut him down a little bit," end of quote. So why did Aaron Rodgers refer to him by that moniker? Well, the Mr. Pfizer name is a reference to the Pfizer commercials that Kelce has appeared in, as he has become a spokesperson for getting flu and COVID-19 vaccine shots at the same time, which medical professionals have advised is safe to do. The commercials appeared during Sunday night's game. Kelsey had also partnered with Walgreens in June 2021 to encourage people to get the vaccine. Meanwhile, Rodgers has been critical of the COVID-19 vaccine and the NFL's policy on it. He caused a firestorm in 2021 with the Green Bay Packers after he said he was immunized, only for it to later be revealed he wasn't vaccinated against the virus when he tested positive for COVID-19 and was forced to miss a game. McAfee asked what Rodgers and Mr. Pfizer talked about on the field. Rodgers said, quote, "Some things need to be left on the field," end of quote. McAfee later brought it up again, asking Rodgers how good it felt to get the name out. Rodgers responded, quote, "Well, he's doing commercials for Pfizer, so I'm sure he's owning it," end of quote. When McAfee and co-host A.J. Hawk mentioned Kelsey's several other commercials, Rodgers gave some reasoning as to why he mentioned Pfizer. Rodgers said, quote, "I was watching the game. I couldn't hear the commercials, but I seen him on a few of them. Him and Pat definitely have a lot of commercials," end of quote. Yeah, you're just jealous because you don't have any more out there. Your State Farm contract is dried up, just like your little nuts have, buddy. Oh, my God. I tell you what, keep calling him Mr. Pfizer, and Taylor Swift's going to write a song about your old ass. I could just see the song. I tried to play a young kid's game. I tore out my Achilles tendon. You know, I could put music to that, and that might be a hit. I should send that to Taylor. Can you make a hit out of this? Oh, my God. I tell you what, I'd like to take a hit at Aaron Rodgers. You know what? We have this message for you there, buddy.
Don't be a douchebag.
Yeah, that's right. I tell you what, you're being warned right now. You keep up your mouth on Travis Kelce, you're going to be the next victim of a Taylor Swift song. And I'm going to laugh. I'm going to laugh hard. Oh, my God. Yeah, Taylor doesn't take any prisoners. She pulls no punches. Ask John Mayer. He'll tell you. Oh, gosh. All right, let's go to our next story here. The Republicans are at it again, trying to get rid of Democrats who want fair elections, just like they've been trying to do that in Ottawa County, just like they're now doing it in Wisconsin. This is Harm Van Huysen writing for the Associated Press. This is dated October 3rd out of Madison, Wisconsin. Republicans who control the Wisconsin Senate's election committee retaliated Tuesday against one of the three Democratic elections commissioners who tried to block them from voting to fire the state's nonpartisan top elections official earlier this year. The committee voted along party lines against confirming Democratic Commissioner Joseph Zarnecki, who was appointed to the Wisconsin Elections Commission in May by Democratic Governor Tony Evers. His nomination heads next to a vote by the full Republican-controlled Senate. The ongoing controversy over the Elections Commission stems from persistent lies about the 2020 election and creates instability ahead of the 2024 presidential race for the state's more than 1,800 local clerks who actually run elections. The Bipartisan Elections Commission, which consists of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, deadlocked in June on a vote to reappoint nonpartisan administrator Megan Wolfe. Zarnecki and the 2 other Democrats abstained from voting in the hopes of blocking the nomination from proceeding to the Republican-controlled state Senate, where Republican leaders had promised to oust Wolfe. Nominations from the commission require a 4-vote majority. Democrats argued a recent Supreme Court decision used by Republicans to maintain control of key policy boards allowed Wolfe to stay in office indefinitely as a holdover. Senate Republicans proceeded anyway, voting last month to fire her. Democratic attorney Josh Call challenged their actions in a lawsuit that accused the Senate of acting outside its legal authority, and Wolfe has remained head of the elections agency while the legal battle plays out. In a public hearing before their vote on Tuesday, Republicans grilled Zarnecki about his decision to abstain from the commission's vote in June. The committee's chair, Republican Senator Dan Knodel, accused Zarnecki of a, quote, failure to act, end of quote, and a, quote, dereliction of duty, end of quote. After the hearing, Zarnecki said, quote, obviously that's the only thing they were concerned with. I'm not sure what comes up next. We'll see what happens. The vote is what the vote is, and we'll take it from here. End of quote. Zarnecki has a long history in state and local government, including 2 years as a state representative and 10 years as a state senator in the 1980s and 1990s. He has also served as Milwaukee County Clerk and held numerous positions in Milwaukee city government. Wolf and election commissioners have been targeted by conspiracy theorists who falsely claim that they were part of a plot to tip the 2020 presidential election in favor of President Joe Biden. Biden defeated Donald Trump in 2020 by nearly 21,000 votes in Wisconsin, an outcome that has withstood 2 partial recounts, a nonpartisan audit, a conservative law firm's review, and multiple state and federal lawsuits. Democratic Senator Mark Spreitzer, a member of the Elections Committee, accused Republicans of bowing to pressure from election skeptics on Tuesday. He said, quote, they made their choice. They sided with conspiracy theorists, end of quote. Well, I tell you what, he's got that right. During Evers' first term as governor, Senate Republicans did not act on many of his appointments to state boards, and appointees from former Republican Governor Scott Walker refused to step down when their terms expired. Since Evers' re-election last year, GOP lawmakers have continued to stymie the confirmation process and signaled their intent to reject some of his picks. Yeah, because Republicans only care about 3 things: staying in power, deflecting, and gaslighting. Staying in power, deflecting, and gaslighting. In a statement posted Tuesday on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, Evers said, quote, these people are volunteering the time and effort to do good things for the state of Wisconsin, and it's really kind of stupid politics. None of those people could be considered radical, crazy people. In fact, if they keep throwing people off, I think I'll start bringing crazy, radical people there. Let them try. End of quote. Ooh, Evers isn't going to put up with their crap. Not for very long. This is the same Governor Evers that fully funded education, public education in Wisconsin for the next 400 years with the stroke of his veto pen, because he has partial veto. He doesn't have line item. He has partial veto, so he can edit out stuff that he doesn't like. He can't strike out full lines, but he can remove stuff he doesn't like. And he removed enough numbers to fund public education for the next 400 years, and Republicans are still pissed at him about it. I love it. I love it. Go, Governor Evers. Tell those evil, violent, conservative traitors in the Republican House and Senate over there to stick it. I tell you what, let's go to our next story here. This is Michael Kranz writing for Ann Arbor News and MLive. This is dated October 3rd. This has to do with our friends over in Ottawa County. Oh, boy. About a month after Ottawa County Board Chair Joe Moss nominated Christina Caramo as head of the Michigan Republican Party, the state Republicans paid roughly $74,000 to a business linked to Moss for undisclosed services. That is according to a report published by the Detroit News. By the way, the Detroit News does share publishing facilities with the Detroit Free Press. However, they have a totally different editorial board. The Detroit News leans to the right. The Free Press leans to the left. So this is great news here. You have a conservative newspaper disclosing possible wrongdoing by the Republican Party. Listen to this. Citing state party bank records obtained by the paper, the Detroit News reported on Tuesday, October 3rd, that $74,261 was paid by the Michigan Republican Party to Jenison-based company For Liberty. According to state records, the resident agent for the firm is Joel Coleman, a business partner of Moss. Coleman confirmed to the Detroit News that Moss is a partner of his in For Liberty as well. Coleman told the Detroit News that due to a non-disclosure agreement with the state Republicans, he could not comment on the payment. Moss co-founded the ultra-conservative group Ottawa Impact, which makes up the majority of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. He did not respond to a request for comment from MLive and the Grand Rapids Press, or as we call it on this show, the Grand Rapids Mess. According to its website, For Liberty provides technology solutions and consulting services. According to the Detroit News, the business was paid $74,261 by the state Republican Party on March 31st, 41 days after Moss nominated Karamo, who was successfully voted in as chair of the state party. While the state party did not disclose what the March 31st payment was for, it did disclose the reasons for 2 further payments to For Liberty. According to the Detroit News, the state Republicans paid For Liberty $1,744 on May 17th and $12,551 on June 21st for digital management. Ottawa Impact campaigned last year on culture war issues and state-county pandemic restrictions and won big, ousting a majority of the county commission's incumbents during the Republican primaries. Since taking power in January, the group has made a host of controversial changes to the way the county does business, including closing the county's diversity office, effectively banning county employees from offering services at pride festivals, and threatening to withhold a sizable amount of funding from the county's health department. According to Ottawa County campaign finance records, the Ottawa Impact Political Action Committee paid a total of $13,718.99 to For Liberty in the 2022 election cycle for bookkeeping, website and email, web hosting, phone service, and data management. In addition to being leader of Ottawa Impact, Moss is also treasurer of the group's Political Action Committee. Liberal advocacy group Progress Michigan said the payment by the state Republicans to For Liberty raises concerns about transparency. Progress Michigan Managing Director Denzel McCampbell said, quote, "While it is well established that Christina Karamo and Joe Moss are more concerned with their extremist agendas than actually serving the people of Michigan, today's news makes it clear that there may be another motive, lining their own pockets." End of quote. Well, you got that right. I've been saying that for a month now. McCampbell added, quote, "While Karamo has been making headlines for her failure to fundraise for the party, Moss is raking in loads of cash and there is no transparency in regards for what the payment is for." End of quote. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Beautiful stuff. This is great. And since we're talking about Ottawa Impact and Ottawa County, let's go ahead and stay there. This is Audra Gamble writing for MLive for the Grand Rapids Press. This is dated September 28th. A group of Republican commissioners who hold the majority on the Ottawa County Board is apparently conducting closed-door meetings to discuss county business. Although they aren't meeting with a quorum of the board, the commissioners, who are part of the far-right Ottawa Impact Group, may still be violating state law, which protects the public's access to the decision-making process. According to a press association attorney, it's possible the way these commissioners are meeting with each other about county business could be violating Michigan's Open Meetings Act. Commissioner Jacob Bonema, who was formerly a member of Ottawa Impact before leaving the group in March over transparency issues, told the Grand Rapids Press and MLive that there is an off-the-books committee called the Chairs Committee, made up entirely of Ottawa Impact members. The committee is made up of commissioners who serve as chairpersons of the 5 county board committees, all of whom are members of Ottawa Impact. That includes Joe Moss, chair of the board's Rules Committee, Sylvia Rodea, chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, Gretchen Cosby, chair of the Finance and Administration Committee, Roger Belknap, chair of the Planning and Policy Committee, and Allison Miedema, chair of the Talent and Recruitment Committee. According to Bonema, County Administrator John Whalefeces Gibbs, who was appointed by Ottawa Impact members, also attends these meetings. The only Ottawa Impact member not a part of the Chairs Committee, Lucy Ebel, does not chair a committee and is currently facing a recall effort in her district. which I hope is successful as hell, and get her out. Because these meetings only include 5 of the 11 commissioners, County Attorney Jack Jordan said the Chairs Committee does not violate the Open Meetings Act because less than half the board is present. Really? Jordan said he doesn't attend the meetings, nor does he know how often they take place. He told MLive, quote, "My understanding is they meet with less than a quorum, and it's just the chairs of the various committees, and they discuss what's going on in the various committees. It's not a quorum, so it's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act." End of quote. Really? Oh, no, I got news for you. The city of Grand Rapids got busted for having these kind of meetings just a couple of years ago, and they weren't quorums either. And they got zapped with the Open Meetings Act, and they had to stop doing their bullshit. So, as I have mentioned, that might not actually be the case. According to Michigan Press Association attorney Robin Luce Herman, whether a group of elected officials meets a quorum isn't the end-all be-all when it comes to the Open Meetings Act. Luce Herman said, quote, "Michigan courts have repeatedly held that an OMA violation can be found when sub-quorum groups are intentionally created to deliberate on public policy and avoid the OMA. A public policy cannot avoid OMA by clothing itself as an advisory committee. OMA applies to both deliberations and decisions." End of quote. There you go. There you go. And like I said, Grand Rapids got nabbed for this a couple of years ago, doing the same thing. The Ottawa County Board of Commissioners rules adopted by all board members in January lists only 5 standing committees, none of which are the Chairs Committee. In the descriptions of each of these 5 committees, policy matters is listed as one of the committee responsibilities. The Grand Rapids Press reached out to all 5 county commissioners who are on the unofficial Chairs Committee, along with whale feces. None of them returned the request for comment about the meetings. Bonema told MLive and the Grand Rapids Press, quote, "I believe Joe, Sylvia, and John are running the county at this point. Collaboration is not happening in the way good governance would demand it to. Voices, especially minority voices, are being silenced, and I think activity like this can hurt everyone who wears the Republican name." End of quote. Commissioner Doug Zylstra, the only Democrat on the board, said he was aware of the Chairs Committee and believes its members use the meetings to set policy. Commissioner Roger Bergman, who has served on the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners since 2012, said he wasn't aware of the Chairs Committee, but assumed some sort of meetings were taking place among the Ottawa Impact commissioners. Bergman told the Grand Rapids Press and MLive, quote, "I think they talk about how they're planning the outcome of the board meetings, how they're going to present their arguments, whatever they are, how they're going to make sure the 6 are going to vote." End of quote. Bergman said though these chair committee meetings don't have a quorum, he still believes they're wrong. He added, quote, "It means they're not being transparent at all. They're trying to hide what they're planning. This isn't right. It leaves the residents out and the rest of the commissioners. It leaves the public out of what's going on behind closed doors. This is a clear example of poor governance." End of quote. Bergman said during his tenure on the Board of Commissioners, there's never been a group like the Chairs Committee. He added, quote, "In the past, we may have done some things like the chair and the vice chair would get together to talk about how to proceed with a meeting, but not anything controversial. We never did policy. In the past, when we had committee meetings, they were always announced. We always had them open to the public." End of quote. Michigan law requires public bodies give the opportunity for participation in meetings where discussion of and decisions affecting public policy take place. In order to make decisions, public meetings must have a quorum, which is a simple majority of the members of the group. For the 11-member Ottawa County Board of Commissioners, that means there is a 6-member quorum. According to the Michigan Open Meetings Act, any meeting of a public body, including a commission, that has a quorum present, quote, "for the purpose of deliberating toward or rendering a decision on a public policy," end of quote, must be open to the public. The act also states that, quote, "all decisions of a public body must be made at a meeting open to the public," end of quote. But according to an information sheet from the Library of Michigan, Even committees made up of less than a quorum must meet in public if they will make decisions that are normally the work of the board as a whole. If a public body is not complying with OMA law, the Attorney General, the county prosecuting attorney, or any person may, quote, commence a civil action to compel compliance or to enjoin further noncompliance with this act, end of quote. This legal proceeding would then take place in the county's circuit court. Any public official who intentionally violates open meetings rules is guilty of a misdemeanor and can be fined up to $1,000. A second violation can result in up to a $2,000 fine and or 1 year in jail. A public official found in violation can also be held in a civil action for damages of up to $500 plus court costs and attorney's fees. Oh, could you imagine if you got 10,000 Democrats to sue each of them? That would be really lovely. I'd love to see them out a ton of money. According to Bonema, he said the way Ottawa Impact members are going about making sweeping changes with lack of transparency to the county isn't sustainable. Bonema said, quote, I believe the people voted for change. I believe we'd bring that change. But if you want long-term success, you want to do it in such a way that people that have a disagreement with the direction of change feel heard. We want to honor all the stakeholders and make time for them. Even if we don't go with their thoughts, they feel like they've had time to articulate it. That's how you build consensus. That's the most powerful thing you can do so the change will last. End of quote. Well, he is right about that. I will say one thing. Bonema's still a Republican. He still believes in all this anti-vax horse crap. But I tell you what, he at least believes in some transparency, some shining of the light, which is more than what I can say for John Whale Feces, Gibbs, Joe Moss, Sylvia Rodea, and the other traitorous ilk over in Ottawa County. And yes, I call them traitorous ilk, because that's just exactly what they are. Once again, they don't care about anything except their own power and how to retain it. And speaking of, since we're getting close to the end of the show, I would be remiss if I didn't say something about the passing of Senator Dianne Feinstein from California. Yeah, I know that she was a trailblazer. However, this was a woman that stayed in office far too long. Just like so many other sitting U.S. senators and Congress people. Congress critters, I guess, if I wanted to take it that far. You know, the last year or two of her life was a living hell, especially when she got shingles. My dad had shingles before he passed away, and that stuff was awful. I wouldn't wish that on too many people. But the thing of it is that she stayed in power way too long. She should have resigned, and her seat should have been filled by Governor Gavin Newsom. It's the same thing with Mitch McConnell. It's the same thing with all these old fuddy-duddies. It's time for them to go. It really is. You know, Matt Gaetz talks about that he wants term limits on Congress. You know what we need? We need age limits on Congress. We need some further checks and balances. We need to have frequent medical updates on the president, on our senators, on our Congress people. If you're not fit enough to perform, you need to step down, whether it's the Constitution forcing you to or not. That's it for this week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.